but the culture within every single organization was different. So what you had to do was not just take, a small sample, but understand across a range of these companies. Well, okay, how do we subtract culture and really get to the real needs? Because there's going to be some needs that somebody that's, working in the cult of hierarchy, if you will, they need to impress the boss. How do you help them impress the boss? But that's the salesperson's job. That's not the messaging part.
Welcome back to the Thoughts on Selling podcast. Today it is my pleasure to have Matt Wilkinson join me from across the pond. Matt, welcome aboard.
Thank you for having me, Lee.
Yeah, thank you for joining. And sometimes I warn people that this question is coming, and here it is. Who is Matt Wilkinson?
That's probably one of the hardest questions that anybody can ever ask. And without getting hung up on identity role theory, I play a lot of different roles. So I'm a life science marketer turned AI strategy partner. I'm also a visiting fellow at Cranfield School of Management and a board member at the Association of Key Account Management. So typically my sweet spot in what I do in my work life kind of sits at the nexus where the sort of breakthrough science is translated into real customer jobs, those jobs that they really get done, and then helping them build value propositions, commercial narratives, and go-to-market strategies.
Very cool. So as we say here in the States, it sounds like you're wicked smart.
I wouldn't say that necessarily, but that's probably because I'm British.
So day to day, is your focus from a messaging standpoint, is it marketing oriented? Is it sales oriented? In fact, I'm going to use a quote that I found. Marketing and sales walk into a funnel and miss each other completely. Tell me about the source of that headline.
Last week, I'd asked a little poll, what were kind of the key sources of challenge that people sort of experienced in that sales and marketing divide? And essentially, one of the top two things were, one was the buying journey and really understanding what that looks like today. And the second was essentially sales and marketing not being on the same page. I think that's always been the challenge for companies for many, many years. There's been huge pieces of research looking at how to bridge that gap. I think the biggest challenge there really looks at, marketing can get very, very much focused on, shall we say, key performance indicators that they're leading indicators, but they don't necessarily lead to the right things. Just post a load of cat memes and you'll get huge interaction, but will that ever lead to a sale? So a lot of the messaging I do tends to be trying to make sure that it works and we're looking at the right messaging depending on where customers are going to be in that journey. So trying to be a little bit more than just a marketer and, really helping to make sure that we're changing the world for the sellers.
I've been on both sides of that conversation. I lived on the marketing side, I lived in the partner management side, and then I made the jump to the dark side, as it were, into sales leadership and sales enablement. And I do see that the KPIs, the metrics that people are tasked with day to day are different. And the ultimate organizational goals are the same, right? Peter Drucker says the job of a company is to create a customer. It's that simple. It's really that simple. And when marketing focuses on butts and seats, or sales focuses on sandbagged opportunities in Salesforce, that's not creating a customer. That's creating friction.
Yeah.
How do we get past that, Matt?
Well, I think there's a whole range of different approaches you can take, but I think the biggest thing is about getting sales and marketing together in the same room and actually working on the challenge of generating customers together. And I think that's why I really love account-based marketing when it's done properly, because yes, you can go out and build a lot of different customers out there and sort of try and get sort of the, shall we say, the long tail customers if you're just marketing and sort of meet needs through e-commerce or whatever it is. But if you really want to make a big difference to the business, you really need to focus on those key customers where, well, not necessarily just key customers, but those strategic customers that are going to be significant in size. And so to do that, you're going to have sales involved because people still buy from people. And you're going to really need to make sure that marketing's supporting that salesperson or the sales team with all of the different stakeholders involved in that complex buying process. So it's really about getting people together and really understanding, who are we strategically hitting? So I think the favorite question I ever ask when I go in and run a workshop is, imagine yourself in a year's time and it's been a fantastic year. What are the brands? What are the companies that you've landed? And then you can build your entire sales and marketing strategy over getting those brands, those logos into the net so that actually everybody's aligned around the same targets. And if we can bring this sort of the egos, the targets of the salespeople, and I say egos in a really positive way rather than a negative way there, and we can make sure that marketing understand what is going to really excite the sales team to go after, to chase, to hunt, then I think you really, really have a powerful proposition.
You and I both know some folks at Arpedio. Ulrich Monberg was on the podcast about a year or so ago talking about account-based selling. And I see what he talks about as a huge leverage point. It's really both account-based marketing into very discrete targets with highly customized messaging, and then the account-based selling of looking at an account as opposed to a person and thinking about a strategy to get in to improve influence. So speaking as a sales leader in a hypothetical situation, how do I get marketing to support my team's activities into 30 target accounts? Not the 10,000 accounts or 5,000 accounts that we think have ICPs in them, but the 30 target accounts that will really move the needle and allow us to hit the next VC milestone?
I mean, I think that's a great question. And I think a lot of the answer really does come down to sort of it depends. And it depends a bit on the structure of the organization itself. But really, I've always been a little bit frustrated when you have sort of sales and marketing leaders. And I do think that they are discrete disciplines. If you are there is a discrete set of skills that people need. I think the best marketers have been sellers and vice versa because they understand the challenges. I really feel that we kind of need commercial leadership there. And so it's really about making sure that we're setting company strategy and then building our commercial strategy off the top of that company strategy that then cascades into sales and marketing together. And if that means that we're going to focus on the top 30 companies, then let's make sure that we're stressing that. Then we create the right teams and the right structures around that target.
I'm in agreement with you. And the next conversation is, well, sure, it makes sense for us to target those 30 accounts and we'll put all of our best people on that. Oh, and we're now not serving the rest of the market. We're not actually doing the traditional things that marketing does. And so there's that tension of, from a marketer standpoint, and again, as a former marketer, from a marketer standpoint of, I'm not doing my whole job.
Then we have to ask, well, let's actually have some strategy and define the things we are going to do and the things we aren't going to do. And I think it's very easy for marketing to take on lots and lots of things and lots of projects and, we're going to do this extra webinar and, we're just going to do this extra thing here. And of course, we have to have bandwidth in to support some of that. But I think also we have to be very focused on what do we actually have the resource to support and support really, really well. And if our target is going to be on 30 customers, then let's make sure that we absolutely serve them as best as we can. And that will be through maybe dropping some of the stuff that we think that we should have been doing in the past. But does that make us not do our whole job? No, because our whole job, our whole purpose should be to generate new customers.
Make a new customer as effectively and as efficiently as possible. So two thoughts came up. One, Hewlett-Packard went to a zero-based budgeting many, many years ago. I don't know if they still do it or not, but in the early 90s, they went to zero-based budgeting. Because in the past, most organizations said, well, we've got $150 million for this year, so we should have 170 next year. And HP went to a strategy of, no, build your plan from scratch. Again, was it more work? Absolutely. Were there a lot of sacred cows that were left, in the chute? Absolutely. The second thought I had was about a conversation with Bob Brennan, who at some point was CEO of Iron Mountain. And I can't remember if it was when he was CEO or not, but a good friend from many, many years ago, he said, hey, Lee, this doing more with less is bullshit. I'm asking my team to do less with less. Matt, just as you said, pick the few things that matter, that really move the needle. And let's do those really, really well and completely drop the other stuff.
And I think that today more than ever, that's so, so important because with the rise of AI and we're in the AI era now, and I know that we're only at the dawn of it. And there's a lot of stuff that's changing the way our buyers behave. There's stuff that's changing the way people buy. We've already got Gartner predicting that 15% of B2B purchases will be made by bots in the next sort of few years.
Yes. And I would sincerely hope that purchasing is all commodity purchases.
I would hope so too.
Yeah. Not if I'm buying a multi-million-dollar services package, I really don't want a bot managing that.
Although you might get the bot managing the transactional part. But with all of this stuff, I mean, one of the things that AI really showed me when deep research came out, my coffee maker had broken. And, in the past, I would have gone off and I'd have looked at all of these buyer's guides and whatever. Shall we say for a Brit who's supposed to drink tea, I drink black coffee and I drink way too much black coffee than I should do.
I won't tell anyone.
Oops, I've just told your entire audience. Sorry, King, I'm letting you down, sir. But essentially, I knew I was buying too many, I was able to track how much I was drinking through the pods I was using and also realized I was contributing to too much plastic waste. So I got a bean to cup coffee maker. And when that broke, I went and used deep research. But I knew enough to be able to put in all the different things that I wanted to rank it on. And I went off and basically built my own buying guide based on what people were saying online about these different coffee makers. I'd just been over so I looked at the first three. Number three, it was a Siemens coffee maker. I didn't know they made coffee makers until that popped up. But I'd just been over at Siemens running a workshop for the Association of Key Account Management.
$500 million transformers and engines and other things and coffee makers. Absolutely.
And it's a fantastic coffee maker and it grinds really well. So anyway, that was the one I bought because the brand was really important. I recognized the brand and I was so impressed by their HQ in Munich. I mean, honestly, it's a phenomenal entranceway. Statues, from a branding perspective, that won me over forever. And so that just went to show how important brand still is. And I think we really have to double down on the things that really make a difference. And so there's so much AI slop, as people are calling it out there now, just sort of people just creating content shock wherever you go. We're just overwhelmed with messaging. So I think we just have to do things that are really, really good and do things really, really well and make sure that actually we're just focused on the people that it matters to.
Aside from the fact that I'm a pour-over drinker, we'll leave that aside. And let's get to your brand preference. You went with Siemens in part because it was a known brand, and B2B buyers look at brands and risk, and more importantly, even brand. Brand is one component of making a decision. Again, if I'm making a multi-million-dollar services decision, I'm looking at mitigating risk. If I do this, what's the likelihood that this thing is going to actually work, that the delivery team is actually going to do what they say they're going to do? Am I going to get promoted or fired? Yeah, and of course, I'm going to build a spreadsheet, and I'm going to put in all the details, and then I'm going to go, what does my gut tell me? And there's hundreds of millions of dollars purchased every day in corporate America on gut feel at the bottom of it. Separately, I'm still hung up on the pour over. You went German rather than French for coffee. Well, let's leave that aside. So let's get into, you spent a lot of time in life sciences, and I spent some time on key account teams calling on some of the largest pharmaceutical companies here in the States. Let's talk about how needs vary in sales and marketing across industries. And the telecom industry says we're different, and the media industry says we're different, and we're cheap, so give it to us for nothing. We might tell people about it. And life sciences is different. And life sciences isn't an industry. It's like 12 different industries or more. When you are thinking about creating messaging, when you're thinking about causing influence to happen, what's the evidence you use to build your messaging from?
I mean, that's a great question. And don't think you can get better than actually going and visiting customers themselves.
Let me restate that because that's 1,000% true. If you don't know what your customer looks like, if you don't know where they live, if you don't know their language of value, if you don't know how they behave, you can't really have an informed conversation with them. Your point of view is potentially much weaker. So let's get back to that. So first, go and visit them, see what they look like.
Yeah. No, I think you've got to absolutely look them in the whites of the eyes and you've got to understand them. I did a project during my MBA with a professor of innovation at Cranfield. And I was fortunate enough to go and do a project for a company called Agilent Technologies who, sell into pharmaceuticals, and they were a spin out of HP, I should say, a long time ago now. And they sell into pharmaceutical companies and to, academia and a whole range of different places. But I was doing some research with them. And one of the really, really interesting things was we went into one pharmaceutical company and, we're talking to two leaders of two different parts of the business, but they bought the same, shall we say, segment of instrumentation. And I've never seen a brand argument, if you will, like that ever. I mean, the way that they talked about these two competitive companies, Agilent and Waters, was about 10 or 15 times as impassioned as, the whole Apple Android conversations of back in the day. And this is because as you rightly say, there's risk and it's their reputations that are on the line. And so I think that there's absolutely, the brand piece is about understanding that. But one of the other things that we were doing as we were sort of doing this research was sort of hidden needs analysis and sort of understanding the jobs that need to be done, was going in and understanding the context of the businesses and also going in and understanding how actually a conversation's happening in different businesses. And what really struck me, I did a separate project when I was still in corporate, was leading an e-commerce project, and we went off and looked at a number of different key accounts. And even just within one segment, you would see three very, very different organizations. So visited three different organizations, all in California. Now, they did have headquarters in other places. And you could sort of use the culture web to try and understand a little bit about them. One of them, you go in and it's kind of a nondescript kind of parking lot building in the middle of an industrial kind of complex. Very nice, but still brick building. You walk up some stairs and, on the stairs going up, it's pattern after pattern, framed pattern as you're going upstairs. And as you go into it really was the cult of knowledge, as I like to call it. And as you went in, there was the conversations. They were all very, very friendly and all about how do we progress things. And it was about knowledge sharing and about how do we move things forward. It was all about the cult of knowledge. It was really, really interesting. And so that they loved that company, my employer at the time, because we'd helped them achieve new things. We went into another company and just as you drove into the car park, it was a grand car park, and around the entranceway, it was large spaces marked out for the CEO and all of the C-suite. And as you walked in, yes, you sign in and there's this grand open, entranceway with a very nice fountain in it. Up on the wall, you've got this fantastic sort of video screen showing when the CEO met with the then president of the US. And it was very much sort of the cult of the CEO or the cult of hierarchy. And so when you went into those meetings, everything was top down. And then there were other businesses we went in to see that there were maybe mixes of the two or had very different things, different signs and symbols that they were exhibiting. But the culture within every single organization was different. So what you had to do was not just take, a small sample, but understand across a range of these companies. Well, okay, how do we subtract culture and really get to the real needs? Because there's going to be some needs that somebody that's, working in the cult of hierarchy, if you will, they need to impress the boss. How do you help them impress the boss? But that's the salesperson's job. That's not the messaging part.
Right. So the salesperson is a translator at some level.
Yeah. So you have to translate something to make it fit the different bits of culture. But you had to understand that, as marketing, you had to understand that all of these different cultures exist and we have to work across all of them. And so I think that was really important.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was thinking about J&J as an organization that makes medical devices, right? Discrete manufacturing, and then they make medication, both, powder and liquid, and that's process manufacturing. And then they make supplies, and that's less regulated or not at all regulated. So you have different personalities, as you say, within companies. It also reminds me of, I visited Merck headquarters outside of Philadelphia a number of times, and right in the main lobby at headquarters, there's this huge poster that says, if we don't act quickly, 4 million mothers will die. And so think about that as a context for going to work. Yeah. You walk in every morning under that sign that says, shit, I have to get to work, right? No time for coffee, dude, or tea. And second, I used that messaging. I ran key account planning sessions for Merck, and I would have salespeople say, well, I'm going to go sell them some database, or I'm going to go sell them some middleware. I'm going to go sell them some CRM or blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it doesn't sound like you are aligned to the mission of your customer. Your customer has this urgent mission to solve big problems. Where is your sense of urgency? Are you aligning with them? Are you in the boat with them? Or are you just selling them shit? And if you're just selling them shit, there's 20 other people that have better shit than you do in the lobby.
You're right. It's so important to get that alignment and be able to do that translation.
I wish I had the foresight to pull my iPhone out of my pocket and take a photo of that. This was over 10 years ago, and I haven't been able to find the poster. The campaign is still running. So they still use that as a context for action in part of their business. And so, when I work with coaching clients, I've got a coaching client that calls on hospitals. When he started calling on hospitals, he would talk about, I can't mention the company's name, but it's a 3-letter word, selling applications, right? Let me tell you about the latest XYZ version 3.4. Now he's talking about patient outcomes, because that's the lifeblood conversation, literally, of a hospital.
Yeah. And it's how they get measured, and it's how they make their money.
That's right. Or it's how they lose their money. Oops. Okay. No more money. Big oops. No more money.
Well, it's not just that. And then there's big lawsuits, particularly in the US, and it gets messy.
So in today's day of AI, here's a fun one for you, Matt. I asked my buddy ChatGPT about AI platforms for training salespeople with strengths and weaknesses. And my buddy ChatGPT, I call her Chat for short, Chat said, would you like me to put together an RFP for you? Wow. So our buyers are having initial conversations with potential suppliers dramatically more educated than they could have ever been educated in forums or at conferences or using Google, right? Because now it's custom tailored, absolutely custom tailored. Mid-sized company, 150 salespeople, calling an enterprise, selling penetration testing, as an example.
Yeah.
Who should I be looking at? What are the top 10 tools? Bing, 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 bing. And here's why. Wow. So the messaging from a marketing and sales standpoint, and I know SDRs who are getting incoming calls saying, ChatGPT recommended I talk to you. How do we help, aside from trying to influence ChatGPT and the other LLMs, which I don't know if people have figured that out yet, but how do we enable marketing to handle that change in buyer intelligence, right? So the Jolt effect said, stop giving customers information. This was 5 years ago. Stop giving customers information. They know more than you do. Now they're way more knowledgeable, and they've already had their questions shaped by a knowledgeable resource.
So I gave a talk on something similar to this, I think it was back in April. I think we need to reimagine the fact that the funnel never really existed anyway, but it definitely doesn't exist anymore. Not in the way that we looked at it. And the fact that marketing has hung on to this, awareness, interest, desire, action, invented in 1898 by Elias and L for generating great ad copy. It's a great acronym and it's helpful in some ways, but it's just not a helpful model anymore. And so I think one of the things that we absolutely have to do is to make sure that we're actually making all of our content so available for the bots to look at. So when Cloudflare announces, oh, we're going to stop this stuff, we need to go in and be checking that actually we're not blocking the bots. I think that's number one. So that's kind of just a simple, easy fix. I think we then have to be looking at what are the key questions that people are going to be asking bots and how are they going to be measuring what's great? And how do we then enable conversations to happen? Back in the early days of Google, I say early days of Google, but maybe 15 years ago.
They just celebrated their 25th, so yeah.
Ranking on Google was kind of a bit of a game and you could really kind of play the game of Google rankings. And then there were a number of Google updates. The search algorithm, I think they were called Penguin, Panda, Hummingbird, radically changed it and really improved the quality of the search engine results pages and really changed the way that we sort of think about what to do as marketers. We're still in the very, very early days of generative search. So whatever advice we give right now, it might be working at the moment. And if we figure out how things work, there's a couple of things I think we can do. PR seems to be more important than ever before right now.
Interesting.
So it's dimensions of our brand and the sentiment across forums and LinkedIn and places, because we're asking for reviews. So if people are giving us great reviews, if people are saying nice things about us, that's really important. Those are some key things that we can do, making sure that we're visible where the AI can search and find us. So those are some easy wins. But how do we actually help marketing to really understand it? We've got to be having, I think sales teams have got to be talking to marketing actually and giving far better downloads as to what those conversations are like. What is the customer telling me when I'm in conversation with them?
Yeah, many years ago, I'm right with you on that the voice of the customer is frequently leveraged in the largest organizations. It's not always leveraged in smaller ones because, one, it's messy, right? Because you're asking a salesperson, pardon me, sales guys, you're asking a salesperson to tell you the truth about what the customer told them, and they're not good market researchers. Speaking as a former market researcher, they don't ask open, neutral questions. They ask very slanted questions. And so the information flow back can be difficult. Or you can ask someone else in the organization or a third party to gather that information. And so it gets a little bit messier. And many, many years ago, as a field enablement person, I suggested that we do closed loss postmortems. And this was fairly early on when people were leveraging that kind of information. When a customer says no to you, there's this golden hour, so to speak, where they will tell you almost anything because they feel badly that they told you no, right? Unless you really screwed it up. They want to help themselves feel better. They want to help you feel better. So if you ask, what could we have done better? What did you like about our sales conversation? What didn't work? How well did we show up? All of those reasonably objective questions that gets a good picture of how did we do? How was the messaging? How was our execution, et cetera? And the answer from the organization, I won't mention the company, but it was Oracle, said, we know why customers don't choose Oracle. They're stupid. Well, okay then. So I took that one off the table and said, okay, I'm going to go do something else to help the salespeople. Most organizations don't have quite that level of swagger that they actually do want to understand why closed lost happened or why closed won happened. And we don't get much of that. We don't get much of why did we win? Well, we won because we're really good. No, really, what were the steps that got the customer's attention, got the customer's trust, got you time and access, et cetera? And the best salespeople don't know. They just do it instinctively. And everyone else, you can't really get good answers on that unless you survey the customers. Nobody cares about the closed won. Hey, we won. Let's move on.
So you say we can't, but there may be things that are coming through that might enable us to get some of that visibility.
Yeah, say more.
So, well, at the moment, we're recording this conversation. Certainly through COVID and since so many sales meetings are now held virtually. I'm still a big advocate for getting out in front of people face to face, but maybe the first conversation or first few conversations you do remotely, then you'd go out and, you have that mix. But those that are being done virtually, if you're recording them, if you're getting transcripts, you can actually run analyses of using AI to be able to sort of pull key themes out, to be able to actually predict based on the conversation rather than the sentiment of, yeah, I've had a great conversation with Lee. We get on really, really well. We connected over so many things. That might feel like it's a great sales call, but actually you might just not be ready to buy or not be ready to buy from me. And actually, so the sentiment of how good was the call versus actually how ready are they to buy can be very difficult for us as human beings to separate. Whereas the AI actually will be able to take or completely get rid of the emotion, and it will actually be able to find the key things that happen, the key trends, the key themes that it can pull out. So there's that, being able to sort of look at those big data sets and find themes and commonalities between recordings.
Matt Dixon completely agrees with you. He wrote The Jolt Effect based on tens of thousands of recordings during COVID. So yes, exactly. And I think you're exactly right. And that works really well for smaller transactions up to maybe 250,000 or so. And it's all relative, right? The $50 transactions, $10,000 transactions, $100,000 transactions. Sure, a lot of those are done interactively and virtually. When you get into multi-million-dollar transactions, much of that is done face-to-face and sometimes off-site. So for example, I have a coaching client who at the beginning of a meeting with two AVPs at a mutual insurance company said, I happen to notice that both of you have been with the organization for more than 20 years. What keeps you here? And 20 minutes later, she got an introduction to the chief digital officer who was new and who had a big agenda at this large organization. And I don't think any AI really would have picked that up, right? Probably would have tagged it as not relevant.
And of course, again, you're looking at generalizations. I think the other thing that, just to come back, that there are sort of these physical AI products now that you can wear around your neck or whatever, where you can actually record conversations. I'm not necessarily advocating for doing so without permission, but people are starting to use AI note takers wherever they go. So actually the amount of information that we might have available to us as people wanting to optimize or at least better understand the sales process and what works and what doesn't.
I would probably be tempted to wear that at home and get coaching on how to improve my relationship with my spouse.
Yeah. I highly recommend don't use it to prove that you were right.
Wait, what?
But you're right. I mean, I think there's some great tools in terms of AI that I've really been a big fan of. So there's a company called Humantic that have built these personality AI assessors. So you can, basically go into LinkedIn and alongside a profile, it will look at what you've publicly posted. Now, this works great if you're posting your own content. If somebody else is posting for you, maybe it gets a bit confused. But the reason I think that we're having such a great conversation is because we both have similar disc profiles.
Right.
And so it will assign its disc profile. We're not having to shift too much of our personalities because actually it's, we're talking from the similar place. And so that kind of just goes to show that buyer intelligence is really important. That enables you to, especially when we're meeting with people virtually, it's harder to go through that traditional kind of mirror and matching and kind of really trying to assess, is somebody, crossing their legs or not? We're not seeing that on the screen. But I think that's the first bit. But then you can map people to a buying group. So as we know, buying's getting more and more complicated, 7 to 12 people in a buying group. If we know who they are and we can assess the sorts of questions that they might ask and we can understand a little bit about who they are and their personality types, we can actually make sure that we're feeding them the kind of information we think that they might want based on their role and their personality. So I think we can be more intelligent about the way that we connect across groups thanks to AI. You're absolutely right. It doesn't necessarily help you ask the right questions because asking great questions is still a skill.
So I think we just defined a new product feature for our PDO and add on to their relationship mapping component where you get to see, who you're talking to and how they fit in the organization. Not an org chart, but more of an influence map. And now if we can put in some color commentary about each of those stakeholders and their disc profile, what their care abouts are, what their language of value is, and so on. So really interesting. And that's kind of where we're going. So the danger is we have an increasing set of tools to enable salespeople with more and more information. And I get a little nervous because I don't want salespeople to be deliverers of information. I want them to have a point of view. And the point of view that my coaching client had was, there's a reason why these people have been with this company for 20 years. If I ask them, we're going to have a good conversation, right? She had to make that connection between those two disparate points, and they were in two different LinkedIn profiles. And in prepping for her visit, we looked at them and there we go. There's an interesting factoid. And so she had to make that closure of, tell me about that. And so in the same way, if we have a sales support platform that says, here are the top 3 issues for this customer, The salesperson can't say, and frequently does, well, here are the top 3 issues for you that I've read about, and that will fall flat. A different presentation might be, I have a point of view about how we might be able to help you improve your results in this area, right? And that's a point of view as opposed to a delivery of information. It's an opinion. It's a hypothesis.
I very much enjoy, we haven't discussed my entire career history, but I spent maybe 3 or 4 years as a science and business journalist. Mm-hmm. And so I love asking questions.
Yeah.
So I very much like the Sandler kind of sales process where you go in and nearly everything is a question. And being able to get more account intelligence and looking at those perspectives, can I actually then ask a question? Hey, how big a problem is X for you? All of a sudden, I'm not stating that I know it. I'm just asking you, is this it? And if I hit the nerve with, 1 out of 3 good questions, then all of a sudden somebody might feel that this guy knows what's going on in the industry.
And I'm being heard, and voila, you're at the top of the pain funnel.
I'm not actually having to sell to you. You're selling to yourself, but I'm just giving you the prompt. So I think the more we can do to help the sales team as a jumping off point for questioning, I think that's really helpful. But I think if we ever try and give people, here's a script, it just sounds forced.
It's so efficient though, Matt. It's so efficient.
It is, but surely we can then just automate that with an AI to go out and do the same thing.
Yeah, that's exactly the next step. It's efficient. It's not effective, but it is efficient.
Yeah.
And we can do great numbers. We can have 10,000 shitty conversations this morning with their chatbot.
And how much damage does that do to your brand versus having one good conversation that actually goes, these guys get it. These guys heard me. And I think the really important thing, as certainly as we go through to more and more digital delivery of stuff and more AI being involved in everything that we do, having people that we can trust to deliver when things don't quite go to plan, I think is going to be just increasingly important. So I think being able to make buyers feel heard is just going to be the biggest skill that any salesperson can have.
I was on a sales call with my CEO. This was a few years ago. I was running sales, and we were having a last conversation, a closing conversation with a large prospect. And the question he asked that I'd never heard before was, what could cause this project to go wrong? And I was horrified that he'd asked that question. It felt to me like he was opening up a can of worms. And because we had a risk-sharing model, he was reducing risk for us. If the customer had said, oh, here are the 17 things that are going to get in the way, he might have said, we're done. Or, okay, let's come up with a plan to manage those. And the response was very straightforward. Here are the 3 things that we need to look at. And we accommodated them, and that was it. It actually made the relationship stronger as opposed to putting questions in. And so, number one, he was being a human being, right? It wasn't the bravado of, we're going to go close this multi-million-dollar sale, and I don't care what happens next. As the CEO, he cared a lot about what happened next.
And I think that sort of pre-mortem of a project is so powerful. You never heard it used in a sales call, but I think that's brilliant. And I think it can really just show how you kind of care about the success of the project. So are there things that we can do before we start? Make sure that we're measuring, we're mitigating, we've got an eye on those things.
As a professional services provider for 10 plus years, I have a pretty good understanding of what can go wrong. And asking the question of the customer takes you to a whole new level because they know stuff about their organization that I don't until I start engaging.
I think the other thing it can do is it can help you put in place guardrails that stop the risks that are going to keep them awake at night. So if they can see that you care about them and the risks that they see, then all of a sudden your competitors aren't going to be doing that unless they've asked that same question.
Yeah. So this has been a fascinating conversation, Matt. I think the number one thing that came out was to sell is human.
Very much.
I think I'm going to write a book with that title. No, wait. It's already been done. Daniel Pink wrote a fabulous book, To Sell is Human. And one of the takeaways from that book was improv and sales are the same thing. I read that a year ago and went down the improv route and have been having a lot of fun on stage with improv. Number 2, selling is about having a point of view and reducing the perception of risk for the customer. It's not about all the information you can provide. It's about knowing your customer. And knowing your customer was the first major point you made.
Yeah.
That's absolutely critical. You have to know your customer. You have to be able to really see how you align. I had a salesperson when I was doing enablement at Google who called on Beyond Meat as a company. He was selling Google Cloud services to the organization. And he would send them photos of him and his family on the beach in Santa Monica eating Beyond Meat burgers. He was ingratiating himself with the buyers by aligning that way, and he knew the product. Fun stuff. Matt, where can people find you?
www.striven, STRIVENN.com.
2 N's.com.
Yes.
Fabulous. And who do you like to work with? What's an ideal customer for you?
Oh, I like to work with people that are fun to work with. So it doesn't matter the size. My ideal customer is somebody that has a challenging problem that they want to solve and that's going to roll up their sleeves and, allow me to get in alongside them and help them solve it.
I love that. I might say exactly the same thing. So thank you for the time. I appreciate the conversation, and we'll talk again soon. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you for having me, Lee. It's been a pleasure.
Cheers. Another deep dive into the topic of sales excellence and the performance mindset. If you found this conversation interesting, I would appreciate it if you would share the podcast with a coworker or two. And to explore this topic in more depth, send me a note via the contact form on podcast.thoughtsonselling.com or find some time for us to talk at meet.acellergroup.com. Thanks.